Hey, we're going live. And this all looks good, although StreamYard, I can't see if my audio is working or not. I'm just going to assume it is. Can I see? Yo, yo, yo. It'd be great if, yeah, I'm just going to assume it's working. Cool, so give me a second. This might break things. I haven't really used this much. Hey, it comes up as a live thing. Oh, wicked. I can hear audio. Nice. It did sound a bit loud, but hold on. Is that better? Okay, that's output. This is the input. Now hopefully this is a bit better. Can I? Oh yeah, that's fine. Cool. Was that someone actually watching this? What up? Alright, so following guide is my attempt at helping myself and possibly others to pass the AWS Certified Solutions Architect Professional Exam. I recommend taking Stefan Marek's course, if I pronounced that right, and taking a few practice exams in this link. So I guess this is a course, maybe 500 slides. I don't really see why I'd need a course. I kind of just, yeah, it's not a bad price. So we'll consider this. We won't write this off. And this is probably what I'd be more inclined to actually buy if I was going to spend money. I have found some PDF brain dumps from, yeah, I don't know where they came from, but they're very similar to practice exams. You can see some questions that you might be likely to get on the actual exam. Cool. So some of it's here. Yep. So author makes no promises. So we're gonna set up here at the same time. I have been keeping a bunch of random files. Cool. So this is all good to go. I don't know why my brain does that sometimes. No, I don't want to talk. I used to do that, but it got in the way. So what I'm going to be doing is kind of, I had a quick look. This is actually a really good study guide, so please give credit to this person. Yeah, they look like they've got quite a bit of experience, and yeah, they've done quite a bit, or I'm sure they have over time. Cool. Yeah, I definitely don't deserve full credit for any of this. So this is the introduction. Right, so the AWS Certified Solutions Architect Professional SAP-C02 Exam Guide. Introduction. The AWS Certified Solutions Architect Professional exam is intended for individuals who perform a solutions architect role. The exam validates a candidate's advanced technical skills and experience in designing optimized, blah 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 blah, based on the AWS well-architected framework. Cool. So I'm guessing that's going to be a big part of what we do here. We'll get a list of stuff that we need to ask about. So we want to be able to design for organizational complexity, design for new solutions, continuously improve existing solutions, accelerate workload migration and modernization. Cool. Oh, that's it. Targeted candidate description. Yep. Blah, 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 blah. That's me. So there are... Cool. So it's a multiple choice exam, which means we're always going to have the answer in front of us, which could probably make this exam quite easy compared to others that I've taken, because for example, I've got quite a lot of AWS experience, and chances are I'd be able to guess through quite a bit of it. We'll see how I go though. So pass or fail, blah 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 blah, similar to other tech exams I've done in the past. I've done my Microsoft courses and exams, and they have a similar scoring system, so 75% pass mark here. Blah 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 blah. This shows which part of it. So system design is the biggest one. Yeah. Actually, I'm going to pause this. Cool, sorry about that. I just had to do some work stuff. Alright, so yeah, this just says what sections things are. Domain 1. Design solutions for organizational complexity. Task statement 1. Architect network connectivity strategies. No, strategies, I meant strategies. Knowledge of AWS global infrastructure, AWS networking concepts, so VPC, Direct Connect, VPN, transitive routing. Cool, so let's that threw me off. I'm sure I could do this a lot faster, but I don't need to work quick. I'm here to study, not to be fast. Actually, reading things over and over again is a good way to do this. So, AWS global infrastructure. evaluate. Cool. So evaluating connectivity options for multiple VPCs. That's I don't really know how to do that or what that looks like. Cool. At least this one I already understand what it, because sadly I haven't actually done a lot of on-premises stuff with AWS, so I have to learn quite a bit here. Same with co-location. I'm not sure what that actually means. Multiple VPCs I can understand. I guess a VPC is sort of like a network, and yeah, I've done network engineering before, so I should quite simply be able to apply the same ideas to that. Troubleshooting. I don't know what that actually... Oh yeah, cool. So it's not actually... Cool, so I've actually set up plenty of IAM roles, and IAM policies, I guess similar to in Windows. You want to explicitly allow or deny something and attach it to a user or a group or potentially an account, I guess. And there's AWS single sign-on, something I've set up before too. Awesome. So I'm quite familiar with that. Actually, there's probably no reason to copy paste stuff like that. Because I'll have this on hand. I'm familiar with AWS organizations, and I have used that and set something up on this before. Never used Control Tower. That's something I read about earlier. This is cool. I've always wanted to know how to do this, and I guess I need to. Yeah, cool. Dealt with all this before. I don't like the AWS CI/CD systems like code build, code deploy, and code pipeline. I'd actually prefer to use GitHub and deploy straight from there. But I understand why it's part of this exam, of course. CloudFormation, I don't use that. We did use Terraform, but even then, I'm liking Terraform less and less as time goes on. I think the things that are going to be difficult for me are that I understand a lot of these concepts and ideas, but I don't know the AWS specific way of doing it. Like, for example, I'll use Cloudflare instead of Route 53. Also, I tend to use GitHub instead of the AWS code building stuff. But that's alright. It's usually pretty easy to learn. High availability. Yep. Cool. Continuous improvement. Hey, here we go. Right. No real specific stuff, but so this is a big exam. So this is where we're gonna copy and paste from. So I'm guessing this person is close to ready. So what's an organizational unit? Cool, so we'll read this. Best practices for organizational units with AWS organizations. AWS customers look to move quickly and securely when launching new business innovations. The multi-account environment provides guidance to help customers plan their AWS environment. This framework is designed to meet security needs while maintaining the ability to scale and adapt their environments with changing business demands. The basis of a well-architected multi-account AWS environment is AWS Organizations, an AWS service that enables you to centrally manage and govern multiple accounts. This post dives deep into the recommended architecture of AWS best practices when building your organization. It will explain and illustrate the recommended OU structure and provide specific implementation examples if you're interested. Yep, cool. Best practices AWS environment page. Managing the... Oh, awesome. This is a gold mine. Actually, yeah. I don't know what this is going to be yet. Why should I set up a multi-account AWS environment? So AWS enables you to experiment, innovate, and scale more quickly, all while providing a flexible and secure cloud environment. As customers build and deploy workloads, they often use multiple accounts to isolate their resources. Yep, cool. I've actually worked somewhere where this has been set up and done quite well. And how it was done there is that each environment was separated by account, and it meant we could give a developer full access or read-only access, and the only way you could actually change anything in that environment was by having full access. Their approach was to make IAM management very simple, and it was the idea that if a developer had access to the environment, that it would be for everything. And I quite like that approach. I'm guessing I might see something a bit different here, but you never know. Cool. So this sounds like a sales pitch. Rapid innovation. Be like, yeah, cool. What does that even mean? Yeah, simplified billing. It makes it easier to actually know where your bills are coming from. Having it by account, it's no different to having a tag on it really, but this just actually forces you to set it up that way. It makes, yeah, like I was saying earlier, it can make managing security a lot easier by having it in a different account. Yeah, easier for business processes. It'd be interesting to see how they actually split it up. Best practices. Oh, this is highlighted. So, an organizational unit, OU, is a logical grouping of accounts in your organization. Created using AWS organizations. This is very similar to Active Directory in the Microsoft world. OUs enable you to organize your accounts into a hierarchy and make it easier for you to apply management controls. Sweet, I've already done this. Thank you. AWS organizations policies are what you use to apply, blah blah. A service control policy is a policy that defines the AWS service actions, such as the EC2 run instance that accounts in your organization can perform. When building this structure, a key principle is to reduce operational overhead. So if you don't need this, don't use it in a way, I guess, because it becomes a lot harder to manage. To achieve, blah, 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 service control policies. Yeah, apply them at the OU level. Let's Excel draw up. Let's hope I have nothing embarrassing in here. Nope. So if I have, container, no, what, actually business name, Acme Inc. So Acme Inc. is the main business, and I've just gone out and bought Loftware business. Joe's business. Paul's business. I just made those names up. Don't overthink it. Alright, so where'd that go? So it applies logical grouping of accounts in your organization. Cool. So my organization is Acme Inc., which is made up of 3 different AWS accounts. which are each, yeah, actually this will be the organization unit. So policy A, I guess policy A gets applied to there, which means it would apply to all of these three. So whatever this policy is would be applied to that if that was the organizational unit. So wicked. Pretty happy with that. That's the same as how it worked with Microsoft, I guess. Because you had the domain, and then you could have a forest. I forget how it all works, but if you've done Microsoft, you'll know what I'm talking about. But me, some OUs can have nested OUs. Oh yeah. And this is what I was talking about before. So say for example, I might have say this was how my business was set up, but these guys just use one account. These would be a what did they call it? A nested OU. So yeah, cool. Given most scan, some OUs can have nested OUs for non-production and production. Counts in that is dev, test, and pre-prod. Should not have, yeah. I didn't actually share dependencies between accounts at all. I preferred each of these environments would have their own resources because it made the complexity go down. I could be wrong and there might be a better argument against that, but that's the way I interpret it. Well, it's like, yeah, some customers, and that's what Joe's business was doing that. He couldn't be stuffed with all of this, so Joe just had his single account, and you'll find, oh crap, what did I do that for? You'll find a lot of businesses will just have the one account for everything. That actually can make it easier when you join them into a bigger organizational account. Apply policies at the OU level. Infrastructure and security OUs. Huh. Different. I haven't had to think about it this way. I've done the infrastructure side, but not the... that... Yeah, where's the security OU? Cool. So this is, I've never seen this before. So infrastructure, that's small. Cool. That's all I've had to deal with before. So it's kind of easy. And this is a bit further how we did it. We had the environment as an account, which is, I guess, under infrastructure, but we didn't have this. Security and infrastructure were both in one. But yeah, this makes sense. So this is new to me. Security OU is used for hosting security related services and access. So log archive. Can you hear my dog snoring? What are you doing? That's awesome. Alright, so purpose, yeah, so log. An AWS account. Oh, so this is a full account. An AWS account that acts as a consolidation point for security-oriented AWS access. Security read-only access. The purpose of that is to enable security team members to access other AWS accounts in your AWS environments with read-only permissions in support of auditing, exploratory security testing, and investigations. For example, in the early stages of investigation, does anywhere you work actually have a dedicated security team? I haven't seen that very often. Security break glass. So this is like an emergency admin account. Actually, in the military, we used to have something like this, where there'd be something locked in a very special safe, and yeah, if a certain emergency happened, there were people authorized to actually get in there and get what they needed. Cool. Security tooling.
From your calendar, Kaylee get from school starts in 10 minutes.
Good thing it's the school holidays.
From your calendar, Kaylee get from school starts in 10 minutes.
I like this. I reckon everyone in the team should have an AWS account so they could learn how to use it. That's a really good idea, and having an OU for it actually makes sense because you can control policy that way. But yeah, a company where I work, I think this wouldn't be something that I would just go through and look at. I'm not sure I'd even have enough of the information I'd need to make a good decision about this. For our application specifically, I'd say yes, but we'd probably have to do it that way and then come up with maybe a standard that we all like, or we can have our own ways of doing it. These are the OUs where the AWS accounts for. Oh yeah, so it's interesting in a way. Like, this is clearly for larger companies. Where I work, we would not have this many accounts. Otherwise, it would just become huge management overhead. A lot of these roles are actually shared between the same people in companies that I've seen. So this is really just based on the organisation, and you'd have to really know what the organisation was doing and how it should be set up before deciding a lot of this. So 90 days suspended. So there are actually best practices for this, is there? See, what I don't get is, why would this be in its own account? Maybe for security reasons. But it's like, yeah, I'd be doing this if I had a much bigger company. Cool. So this is basically just organising your business and actually thinking about the resources you're going to have, who should have access to them, and what they should be able to do. It's quite useful. Cool. So organisations, I have actually used this before. Well, this is what I needed to use to have multiple accounts in the one thing. Cool. So yeah, this just makes it easy to manage more people and. this work. Cool. So instead, I used to call it prod and non-prod for all the others. SDLC sounds way, pre-prod. Wow, I've never heard that one. Cool. That was actually a pretty good overview. Da, 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 da. Why? The real reason is to give AWS more money, but no, it is a good way to manage things. Basis of well-architected framework is AWS organizations. Same thing we've already read. Cool. Same. Oh yeah, cool. That's what we just saw. Nice. Managing the multi-account environment using AWS organizations and Control Tower. We just read that. I kind of like that. I might do a exercise to remember that. Yeah, that's common. That's what I saw as well. So I've used this before. This is where we create it. SDK. I guess you could do infrastructure as code. That's the way that I've worked with it before. It was a Terraform project to manage it. I'm not sure if I'd do it that way again, but I would definitely define it all rather than building it out as you're thinking about it. That's a quick way to make a mess and to cost yourself a lot of money. This is the one that I haven't seen again. I actually didn't know Control Tower existed. Looks like it's possibly quite useful. It gives you a pre-built multi-account framework, so you can set up with a few clicks. Control Tower abstracts new accounts automatically. So this is probably why I haven't heard of it, because I would have done this with infrastructure as code, and yeah, I didn't actually need the tool, but it's useful to know about it, and it might be better than the way that I'm doing it. Yeah, it says if you can get away with it, use Control Tower, because Control Tower's gonna do it right. Well, let's have a so it's basically a template from people who actually know what they're doing. So admin, yep, automated best practices, services, so a lot of self-serve. It's kind of like a platform as a service, I guess, and that's what AWS is in a way, as well as much more. Multi accounts, compliance, residency. So a landing zone is a well architect. Yep. So our company would have a landing zone, I guess. Cool, 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 cool. Oh god, I forgot they changed that name. Why change that name? So single sign-on is now Identity Center. Federated access to accounts using Identity Center. So it's all stored in S3. Cross-account security audits. I'm gonna Google this one. I don't know why I'd want this. Terraform just complicates stuff. I get it's good for managing state, but yeah. I can't end up using it anyway because no one wants to use it. And I find it hard to argue for. Comprehensive controls. Cool, so it hooks into CloudFormation if you use it. So this is, in a large enterprise, you can see why this would be very important. So a guardrail can either be preventative or detective, so active or passive or reactive, and no. Reactive would be that. What's the other word I'm even looking for? Preemptive. And it can either be mandatory or optional. So maybe alert only and actually blocking it from happening. Cool. These are great when you actually have a steady application in place. Like I find stuff like this is quite painful to build early on. Like if there's an early stage startup and they're trying to build all this stuff around an application that's constantly changing, you're not going to have much fun. But if your application's consistent and it basically hasn't changed much for years, then this is great. I think this is where working with AWS in a much bigger company would make a lot of this make more sense. Because for me, I'd be doing all of this for a handful of people in most cases. Cool. Config, so assess, audit, and config management. Hey, we get another video.
In this video, you'll see how to create rules in AWS Config to automatically assess, audit, and evaluate the configurations of your Amazon Web Services or AWS resources and enforce compliance with your organization's policies and guidelines. We'll start in the AWS Management Console. For the purposes of this example, we'll enforce compliance of an Amazon Compute Cloud or EC2 instance. Before you can configure the config service, however, you need to first ensure that your instances are being managed by AWS Systems Manager. To do
No.
this, let's create a role having specific permissions in Identity and Access Management, or IAM. Next, let's search for the appropriate policy to attach to the role. In this case, we want to give Systems Manager permission to manage our EC2 instances. Next, enter a role name. When you're ready, click the button to create the role. Once you've created a role that ensures your instances will be managed by Systems Manager, you can assign the role to existing instances or create new instances. In this case, let's create a new EC2 instance. The config server. Created a role that ensures your instance. Next, let's search for the appropriate policy to attach to the role. Systems Manager. Next, let's search for the appropriate policy to attach to the role. In this case, we want to give Systems Manager permission to manage our EC2 instances. Next, enter a role name.
Amazon EC2 role for SSM. Amazon. What was it? EC2. It's hard to know if these are default and give it a role name. Amazon EC2 role.
When you're ready, click the button to create the role. Once you've created a role that ensures your instances will be managed by Systems Manager, you can assign a role to existing instances or create new
Yeah.
Let's define a tag that has the key, name, and the value, dev test. Ensure that you have selected the appropriate key pair you want to use to connect to this instance, and then accept the terms. Now, we can launch the instance. Next, we're going to connect to this instance and install the Java runtime environment behind the scenes. This is the software we'll use to illustrate how to enforce compliance. Now, let's navigate to the AWS Systems Manager, where we should be able to view our managed instance. Under Managed Resources, we can see that the instance we created has indeed been configured for Systems Manager. Next, let's see how you can perform an inventory of software running on your managed instances. First, we'll create an inventory association with the target set of managed instances by specifying the tag. Here, we'll narrow our scope down to instances with the name we tagged earlier. When the inventory runs, we will collect details on installed applications, AWS components, network configuration, and other information. Once you've reviewed the details, you can set up the inventory to run and begin collecting information from managed instances. After the inventory is run, you can review the information collected for each instance.
Can't believe it's Windows.
In the list of applications, you can see that Java is installed on this instance. Let's make a note of the exact name of the application so we can use it later when we set up our monitoring.
See, this is all just installed by a bash script.
Service is recording configuration changes to our resources. Recording is on, so we're set. Now, let's navigate to the config service, where we can create a new role that will monitor configuration changes in our resources. You can use or customize existing roles, or you can add custom roles to suit your needs. In this case, let's look for rules that blacklist non-compliant applications. Let's select this rule that checks that none of the specified applications are installed on the instance. Here, we'll specify the exact application name for Java that we noted earlier. You can choose what remediation action to take on a non-compliant resource. Remediation actions are executed using AWS Systems Manager automation. There are a wide variety of actions you can take, such as sending an Amazon Simple Notification Service, or SNS notification, to generate an email message, or trigger an AWS Lambda function. You can also create your own custom remediation actions. In this case, we're going to specify an action to stop using new instance. We also need to specify the instance ID as the resource parameter. Now we are ready to create the rule.
I've never been in a scenario where this would happen.
We can start running instances. Let's refresh the results. The rule has identified one non-compliant resource. Let's investigate further. Here we can drill into the details of an individual resource. Viewing the installed applications, we can see that Java is installed on this instance. Let's run our predefined remediation action and see what happens. Now, let's return to our EC2 instances.
And it's turned off.
As expected, we can see that this instance is now stopped.
Is that
Behind the scenes, we'll uninstall Java from this instance.
is that Windows running on a micro? Nice.
Now we'll return to our config rules. When we refresh the results, we can see this rule is now compliant.
Cool. So, how far? So, AWS account organization unit migration. So, remove the member account from the former organization. I don't quite understand. If this, I've actually needed to do this before. Oh, is my chat GPT not working here? What did I? Oh, that's right. I always open up the same tab twice. Organize OU migration. No, it wasn't. It wasn't these answers. It was more complicated than that. What happened is I had an invitation to a new organization, and when I clicked on it, it wouldn't actually accept it. Yeah, I think this is possibly what we weren't doing, but cool. No, we got AWS involved, and I don't like ChatGPT's answer here. No, sorry, Bob, but cool. So obviously, if you're migrating, you need to detach the account from all its old places. So an example here was a big company came and bought out the company that I own or work for, and we're getting pulled into their organization. You would have to do a migration in this case here. Send the invite to the member account from the perspective. Yep, this is something I've done before. I've tried to accept an invite, but that's where it hasn't actually worked for us. I forget what the details were. Cool. So ensure the organization account access role. So these are what we need to remember. Easy way to set up and go. And using AWS OU. Automate setups. So given you actually like their use case, you can do this. Security. I forgot what I said. Service control policy. Service control policy. Bloody acronyms. using guardrails, and guardrails are 2 dimensions, and they can either be proactive or predictive or detective. So one side is active and one side's more passive, and they can be mandatory and optional. Sweet. Detects policy violations. So the example we saw was with Java. It had a blacklisted application. When the application is detected, it uses SSM to remove or to perform an action. In this case, it just stopped EC2. You could either remove the application or kill the infrastructure, I guess. And given the type of application I work with, a lot of this doesn't actually apply because we've already controlled all of this before the infrastructure gets created on AWS. And this is very similar to Active Directory and thinking about managing a Windows domain, an organization. And explicit deny is always, that's actually, I was thinking about that before I even read it. So allow versus deny. If any denial in policy is present, So I'm pretty sure in the Windows world, how we used to manage this was we would only ever explicitly allow things, and I think there was 1 or 2 policies that just had to be done with a deny, but they were very sort of limited as to what they were used for and who used them. And that way it made the admin's life a lot easier because they didn't have to think about both deny and allow every time they had to solve a user's issue. They just needed to check if the user had access to something, and the explicit allow made it a lot easier. LDAP is the protocol for software protocol for enabling the location of data. So all of the information you have for accounts in Active Directory is called LDAP, and that's where you have your name, your phone numbers, your job titles, etc., who your manager is. And it used to be how you'd manage Windows accounts too. So S3 buckets. IAM credentials report. IAM security tool that lists all your AWS accounts, IAM users, and the status of their various credentials. Good for auditing permissions at the account level. Nice. I should actually have a look at this because the problem is that if you come into a bigger organization where everything's already set up, developers don't like changes, so poking around with IAM accounts, changing who can do what, it's not as simple as just coming up with a good solution and applying it. Like, you've got to have a bit of give and take here. IAM access shows the service permissions granted to a user and when those services were last used. Can use this. That's not a bad idea. Actually, yeah, I didn't know that existed. I've used the policy simulator, but it wasn't that easy to figure out without, like, the first time I used it, I was using it to troubleshoot permissions on an S3 bucket. Policy simulator, what I was doing is I entered the account, entered the resources and the action that it was trying to do. the problem was that the simulator actually worked, and we couldn't figure out why it was actually doing it this way. I did end up solving it, but I can't remember what the details were. But yeah, Policy Simulator wasn't as simple as just clicking on it and figuring it out as you used it. It was actually a little bit challenging. Access Analyzer. What's the difference between advisor and analyzer? Service to identify unintended access to resources in an organization and accounts such as Amazon S3 buckets or IAM roles shared with the external entity to avoid security risks. And this is the evaluation logic. This is quite good. So decision starts with deny. So if you've got the policies, is there a deny? If the answer is no, then you continue. If it is yes, then you're going to have your decision there and then. That's why I said when we were working with this, we used this very sparingly, because imagine if you were an administrator, say, or a support person, and you're trying to figure out an access issue and you're getting caught up by this deny here. It's going to ruin your day and probably mean that it will take a long time to actually figure out what you're going to do. So if, yeah, all policies and there's no deny, we go through, is the principal's account, so principal is the account you're talking about. That took me a little while to work out in AWS. So if you see the word principal, it is generally for a resource. So say an account would be a principal. I'm pretty sure that's what it is. I don't know if an S3 bucket would be a principal, but it's not relevant for here anyway. So is it part of a service control policy? If yes, is there an allow? Then yeah, we keep going to the next stage. But if not, then bang, game over. You're not able to, because I think that they'd say that's an implicit deny. The words are right there. That's what I was looking for. So explicit deny says that we actually state that this is going to be denied. Implicit deny says that it's just denied because there's no better rule and we're just being safe. So you have to have an explicit allow for it not to be caught by an implicit deny. So is there an allow? Yes. Does the requested resource have a resource-based policy? Yes. So see the policy. If no, then move to the next one. Does the principal, so the account, have an identity-based policy? So are you in the sandbox account or are you in an OU that has restrictions? Then you'll get game over here. But if you're not, then yes, is there an allow? Move on to the next stage, because we don't need to see that. Again, it checks the next thing, and then more implicit deny, more checks, and eventually it allows you, or if you're not supposed to have it, you'll be denied again. And the key point here is just be very careful where you use your explicit denies, because I have actually seen that take up a lot of time and energy and resources, which comes down to money. Amazon Cognito. I haven't used this service either. So this is like their version of, say, OneLogin or Okta, I guess. Web Identity Federation Service, Identity Broker, handling interactions between applications, resources, and web IDPs. I recently saw this as internal development platform, and it confused a lot of people, but it didn't have the lowercase d, and I assumed that's what this was here, but I with a lowercase d and a capital P again. This stands for identity platforms. So it would have been just easier for them to write. I don't know anyone in the industry that says, hey, can I do this with the IDP? Like, if someone said IDP to me in a normal conversation without context, I'm not sure I'd know what they were talking about. Synchronizing data from multiple devices means that, yeah, so you can use SNS to send notifications to devices. Yeah, cool. So I'm guessing, I don't know what that would be for, but is that for multi-factor authentication or something? User pool, so this allows you to have users from other places, I guess, or maybe it is to host the user pool. I'm sure it's capable of both of them. I know when I set up AWS SSO or IAM Management Center or whatever, is it Identity Center? Whatever. Why did they rename that? That was just not that bright. IAM Identity. Yeah, it's such a bad rename that they actually have to put this in the title. Like, why? Now I'm lost. So what was I actually doing here? It's all good. So I need to look into a bit more about this, because I'm not sure on its complete capabilities. Yeah, but what I was saying, when I set this up, I was going to use it with a third-party service, so we would be managing our users in that third-party service. I'm not sure what the details of what we'd actually need to be managing, but when I ended up setting it up, because that was managed by someone else, I ended up just using the AWS SSO system, which is now IAM Identity Center. I had my users created and stored in there. But I'm pretty sure that AWS is capable of taking the users from another third party and provisioning them via that link. It's quite a cool system. And when even our company is not that huge, and we find it useful. Like we can manage our users for multiple services from the one place, and you can add AWS to this as well. There's a marketplace of predefined services that you can integrate with it too. It's only 3 minutes. Cool. So what I explain? So we use one login. It's actually pretty good. kind of feels like what did I used to use for Windows? God damn, I don't even, was it called Active Directory? But systems manager, I can't remember the name for it, but whatever that tool was in Windows, this kind of feels like a web version of that just gives them access to whatever they need, and it all works through that. So Resource Access Manager. This is kind of cool, but I don't know how it works. Does it do things like VPC peering? And I don't actually understand a lot of the technicalities behind it because I haven't really had to do it before. The one that I like is AWS Subnet. What is it? Scenario 2. Yeah, this is what I like. Or this is what I've worked with anyway. I shouldn't say I like it. Just because I'm familiar with something doesn't mean I like it. So yeah, this example demonstrates how to create a VPC you can use in a production environment, different availability zones. So this is like how I like to have my VPC set up. So basically there are all your resources. So I'd have a public subnet, which means I guess things can hit the internet from the public side, but on the that's public as well. So they're the two zones. There's my private, and this server. This is where I'd put my database. So if or server or anything private that a user on the internet shouldn't get into. So, for example, if I want to connect to this server or whatever's running here, I would have to come into the public subnet and then connect to my host, which could be an EC2 instance, and then I'd have to use a Bastion, or that would be set up as a Bastion host, which I then use to tunnel into the or SSH into the private subnet instance, which I can only get to from within our network. I should never be able to get directly here from the internet directly, and this does have internet out if you configure it in a certain way. I have done a few exercises with this before, and it's worth looking at because I learned a lot going through this. So resource access manager, wow. This stuff used to be hard to do. I'm guessing it probably is still, but this is probably just a well thought out template, and yeah, VPC sharing. I'm almost too scared to share things between AWS accounts. Like in the setups that I've used before, if I was to do it this way, I'd be worried that something accidentally has access to another resource that it shouldn't. Or I know you'd have to plan it out and make sure it all didn't, but it feels like it could easily. That makes sense. Ew. If you're in a Windows world, you'd have to be worrying about licensing and that sort of thing, which in Linux and open source land, we think about licensing, but just in a different way. Like we have software licenses, but it doesn't actually interfere with the installation process. Wow, yuck. You can tell I know Windows is important. I worked with it for a long time, but I wouldn't be happy if I had to go back. So API gateway. I have used this before, but it's not something that I know a lot about. Cool. So, what was the difference? Yeah, I had a API gateway to my Lambda function, but I also had a Lambda function that had API access without the need for an API gateway. There's software like Kong is an API gateway. I imagine what this is sort of similar to. Called custom domain name. Cool. So this integrates with say you had a user pool of all your users that were getting provisioned by a third party, or you had a bunch of users that you'd created yourself. API gateway can handle security with that, which is kind of cool. I guess if you set this up with your own software, means you could leverage stuff like that. I've seen these, and I don't know how much you can get done with just the API definition. I'm sure it's probably a lot. Custom domain name HTTP. Yeah. I don't use edge computing. I've heard about it, and I know lots of people that love it, but the applications I work on and develop tend to be in a very specific location. So our resources are in that location and in that location only, and then we'll leverage things like vertical scaling. It's not to say horizontal scaling isn't good, but my experiences with vertical, horizontal, you'd be looking at something like Kubernetes, or even if you've got distributed systems, that's where especially SQL databases can get quite complicated. This is a new one I learnt actually from looking at this study guide. When I started doing AWS, we used ALB type of load balancer, and although I saw classic load balancers and I knew that they were there, I didn't really know what the differences were. So what this means is that in our application, we have multiple EC2 instances that are hooked up to a target group, which is another resource on AWS. And it means any traffic that goes to the load balancer will have a session that's tied to the target group. But if you're on a classic load balancer, your session is limited to that EC2 instance. So if that EC2 instance goes down, then your session goes down with it. Whereas on the more modern ALB type, and having the target group there, your session will stay alive and the EC2 instance can be replaced without actually damaging your session. Now, that's a pretty cool function. Can check health check of instances. That's poorly written, sorry. Yeah. So what they mean by this is when you configure a load balancer, you can configure a health check, which in our case just is a request to our application, and it spits back a result. And if we get that result, we know it's healthy. If we don't get that result, we know that there's an issue with the server and the auto scaling group needs to kick in. So there's obviously a problem with that instance. The quickest and easiest way is to just kill it completely and to bring up another one that we know is going to work. Cross-zone load balance. Yeah, I thought this was just by default. Well, if you have resources in different availability zones. So AWS has regions and it also has availability zones. The region I work out of the most is AP-Southeast-2, and that has 3 availability zones. So it just means if one of the data centers has an issue and I'm in A, B, and C, then I should be fine. But if I was try and save money, I might only put my resources in A. Means there's a bit of a risk that my resources could go down in the unlikely event. I tend to not worry about it too much because my thought process is with the stuff that I have, if AWS goes down, then unlucky, really. Like, AWS is a much bigger company than I am as a person and any of the companies I've worked for, so I haven't had to worry about it too much. And over the years that I've had my career for, it's never actually been a problem for me. And I've even sort of had the thought in my head, it's like in the small percentage and time that might happen, I'll just get up and start another instance myself. Like, people forget that we do actually exist and there are humans as well. The entire world doesn't need to be automated. Like, if something's a bit more complicated to automate it, sometimes the human's a better choice. Cool. So classic load balancer, HTTP. Oh yeah, so route patterns that dictate HTTPS. Oh yeah, so the classic doesn't support WebSockets, which would actually potentially hurt us in the near future. What's a GLB? Gateway load balancer. Far out. Is that an ISP thing maybe? I don't know. But path route patterns, cool. So network load balancer I've seen and I understand how they work. Classic load balancer, kind of. Application load balancer, yes, this is what I work with all the time. And yeah, I haven't had to deep dive too much. Pardon me. And this is, yeah, so X forwarded for header means that when traffic hits our server, that the server actually knows which IP the request came from instead of just getting the IP of the load balancer. If this isn't forwarded, every request on your server is just going to be from your load balancer, and it means you can't actually see what's going on. And this is, I'm a web application developer, or I do DevOps for a web application, so this is the one that I'm most familiar. Following doesn't need encryption. Yeah, that's cool. Although that should work on any port. It shouldn't just be limited to 80. Maybe AWS has something for that. Has a static DNS name. Yep. And this is what I think you'd most commonly see. I think this is sort of like an older load balancer. I actually ran into one of these in the wild when I worked for Department of Defense. I was doing desktop support, and Citrix was all the rage. I actually got my certification for that too. But yeah, basically what it was for any of the traffic that was hitting this thing on the network would actually, because it was going through Citrix to another network, one connection wasn't enough for the entire company to use. So that's where I first saw a hardware load balancer. I didn't quite understand what it did at the time, but yeah, going back, I'm sure I would now. So yeah, there's not a single IP. That's kind of cool. So sticky set. Oh, it's same thing. I like how I've got like through a tiny bit of this, and we've been going for ages. I'm actually going to get up soon. Oh yeah, so gateways, firewalls. I don't actually know a scenario in my head where this would be required, but I'm guessing if there was like, say, on-prem stuff mixed with AWS, or if there was, yeah, a different use case maybe. This is actually a really good study guide. Connection draining. Oh god, this can be challenging. I remember when we were setting up our deployment system, figuring all this out took us so long because there's a few settings and places you can change this in, and when you have a delay for things, it's hard to know when that delay is running, and sometimes that delay doesn't start till after another delay. So when I was learning this, it was almost 20 minutes sometimes I'd have to wait to see if my test had worked or not, which when I was waiting 20 minutes, it was obvious that what I'd done didn't work. But because of AWS and how it works and my knowledge at the time, I actually had to wait that time. But it didn't take too long to figure it out. So yeah, it has to be a 200. Oh, yeah, that's cool. I don't use Route 53, so I don't actually know a great deal about it. I didn't really like it that much. I prefer Cloudflare. What's HC? I mean, HC in this case. Oh, health check. Oh, yeah, so an average, yeah, that more advanced health check. It's so expensive to use this stuff. Yeah, so a smart way to use this, and the way we did it, is we've got a simple check that our application can run, and yeah, it tells us, are you running? Yes, no, and it works really well. Configure out of I, and well, I guess that means it must, yeah, it must be a request just like anything else. What is Global Accelerator sort of like Cloudflare proxy? I wonder if this would be cool for like IPTV, because well, it's dead now. Everyone just uses the internet, but back when it first came out, it was quite complicated. Aye. Are they similar tools? I don't know. That's when I read this, I get the picture of the Cloudflare proxy in my head. So that the classic ELB, I guess. So this is just same as any DNS server. Although I remember when I used Route 53, the way I entered stuff in, the syntax was annoying compared to Cloudflare. Because that would be a private DNS. You can't put an alias to a private server. Cool. Well, that's about as far as I'm going to do today, because it's really starting on Route 53. So if you stop by, thank you. I hope this actually worked. It would be embarrassing to go see 2 hours worth of video where my microphone wasn't working. But yeah, I'll catch you later.